most advanced pitch shifters available in hardware form, featuring 2 independent polyphonic pitch shifting engines, a powerful 16-step sequencer, and over 200 user adjustable parameters. We're going to be taking a look at 6 presets I came up with, and at the end of the video we'll walk you through how to make one of your own. Stay tuned.
Ladies and gentlemen, has been a small part of what you will witness tonight as you attend my performance of Mystery and Magic at the high school auditorium. Tickets only $50.
You may go.
Later on, you'll be shown
Your quarters.
Here, everything is regulated
By machines.
the things are very different.
Here. You may go.
Later on, you'll be shown
Your quarters.
From now on, you'll be able to hear my instructions.
to be taking a more in-depth look at the moment machine. Upon first glance, its many options may seem a little overwhelming, but I promise you, once you learn some of the basics, you'll be on your way to making some amazing presets. That being said, we're going to walk you through making one right now. First thing we're going to do is power on the unit. I really like this screen. Alright, so we start off here with the default setting. It's important to note that there are 3 option screens. The first one here is going to be for our global settings. The next one we get to by clicking our encoder knob just once. This takes us through to our step menu, and then on our second click here, this takes us to our configuration page menu. Excuse me. One more click takes us back to the top. Now here we've got the BPM, you've got your multi. This basically just speeds up the BPM by how many ever you turn it to. We're going to keep it at 1. And the direction and how many steps. The default setting is set for 8, but for the purpose of this video, we're going to bump it up to 16. Okay. Now let's go into creating a sequence. We're going to go now to our step menu, and we're going to get there by clicking the encoder once. Now, this section here, this shows you what step you're on, and this P1 here is what, this is where we actually go in and plug in what note we're going to be using. Okay. For me, I am going to, I want my first 8 notes to be no sound, just the sound that's coming in without any pitching. So for the first 8, we're going to do that. One moment.
From now on, you'll be able to hear my instructions. Just remember to regulate your volume knob.
Alright, now that we've got nothing assigned for the first 8, the next set of 4, I want that to be plus 7, which will take us up to the fifth note of our major scale. Real quick, let me bounce back to our first page.
Here, everything is regulated by machine.
On the second page of our global menu, we get there by just turning the encoder knob. We can actually see our mix, feedback, portamento, and scale. Right now, we're set to the major scale. I'm going to leave it there. Click my encoder one time, and now we're back at the step menu, and we are right where we left off. So for the next set of 4, I want that to be, again, plus 7 semitones. So in the major scale, 7 semitones equals a fifth, which takes our C major 7 that we're going to be playing and bump it up to a G. Okay, one moment while I do that. Now the next set of 4 here, I want that to be plus 11. Alright, perfect. Now, on the OP1 here, I'm going to go ahead and engage the loop that I created, which is just a C major 7 droning till infinity. Let's go ahead and start our sequence and see what we get. Now, if we go back up to our global settings menu here, which was our first menu, if we turn our encoder knob 2 times, we can now see our sequence in progress. let's start having some fun. I'm gonna turn the encoder knob back this way to move to the second page of our global settings here. And now we have access to our mix, feedback, and portamento. Portamento actually means that it glides into the next note. You know, we have two types of portamento. We have the SM and the step. So the SM is our smooth portamento, so it'll just glide through a note, it'll cascade through it, whereas if we increase it to the step, it will take steps up to that note. I'm going to increase my portamento here just a little bit. You'll hear it as it gets ready to go into the next note. We can add some feedback here. Now, real quick, let's do something else. So we click our encoder knob one time and that takes us back to our step menu. Now from here, when we turn our encoder knob, you'll see here we have access to the same mix, feedback, and portamento as we did on the main page. And that comes in handy, it really does. But the next thing we're going to be taking a look at is our alternative step sequencer. So the best way to explain this is by first starting here, I would say. It's basically what this says is after our first sequence that we've created, the one that we just labored and made, and this basically says after that sequence plays X amount of times, and that's to be determined by this knob here, it will now play this new sequence. Okay, so let's go ahead and make a new sequence here. I am going to say for the first 8 steps, I want it to be +7. So I'm going to do that, bear with me. Okay, and then now for my last set of 8 notes, because remember it's based off of a 16-step sequence, I want it to be -1. There we go. So now what's going to happen is our sequence will play through, our original sequence will play through 2 times, and then it will jump to this next sequence here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start off by going to my global menu, turn my encoder knob 2 times so that I can see the progression move through, bring in the drone, and start the sequence. Now you'll see the little stars here. The star indicates now that we are on our alternative sequence. It's going to play through one more time, and then it's going to go ahead and go back to our original sequence. There we go. Now, let's go back real quick to the step sequencer. I'm going to turn that down. I'm going to click one time. And now we have a few other options afforded to us, but real quick, let's talk about this P2 here. So the P2 section here is going to be a second sequencer that runs parallel with the existing sequence. We're going to leave ours off for right now. Instead, I want to draw your attention to our random page. Now, the random page here, this is where we can actually basically say that we want, for example, maybe I want the first note of every sequence to change, to randomly change to something else. Well, it will randomly change, and it will randomly change based upon the scale that we've selected, which is, the major scale. I'm going to turn mine off. Okay, and then we can do the same thing with our mix, feedback, portamento. We can have those just randomly change based upon the percentage here. With the full 3 bars lit, that's going to be 100%, meaning that every time it's going to change any one of these parameters. Let's move to something else. If we click our encoder knob, we now move to our configuration and assignments menu. Now here basically we can actually determine things like what preset we are on, and we'll talk about that in a second. We also can talk about the clock, what's setting the clock, and right now INT means that it's actually based upon the internal clock. In a moment we are going to change that to MIDI so we can sync it up with like some drums and things like that in Ableton. When we move over here, this is where we start assigning our foot switch here. You have here we can set whether or not it latches or it's momentary. Here is the destination, and then here is the value. So let's say, for argument's sake, I'm going to set mine to feedback, and then I'm going to increase the value, and I'm going to say that it's momentary. Now this tells us the direction. So basically that means is right now it's increased that for us, but now once we hit this, you hear it increasing the feedback. So now when we go ahead and hit this switch here, it's going to ramp our feedback up. I'm going to turn that down a bit. It almost gives it kind of a flanger-esque kind of effect. Now when we turn this page here, you'll see that we now have another one. We can link another assignment to this function foot switch here, and that can be anything from the portamento to the mix to the multiplier, like speeding up our sequence. Let's actually do the portamento. That might be fun. So we're going to do the portamento, and we're going to say that it's momentary, and we're going to increase it. It can get pretty crazy if you wanted to. I'm gonna go ahead and do is I'm gonna go back to our first page. Here on this screen here, you'll notice that it says preset 1. So if I hold save, and I can hold save no matter which menu I'm on, so any of the three menus, if I hit and hold save, it will save that preset. But now down here in the configuration menu, this basically will determine where the save happens. So for me, I've already created 6 presets, so I'd want this to save over the 7th preset bank. So if I hold this down, it'll now save that to preset bank 7. Now I'm going to do one other thing here before we get out of here, and I'm going to change my clock source to MIDI. So basically what that means is when I engage MIDI on Ableton, for example, then it'll start this sequence. You'll notice right now it's froze where it was, and that's because there's no MIDI going through to start the sequence. So I'm going to go ahead and start Ableton, and that'll pretty much take us on through. If you liked this demo, consider coming back for more. Likewise, if you want to see more of the Moment Machine, if you want us to kind of go through and explain everything to you, let me know in the comments section, and maybe we'll make a part 2 to this video. Alright, until then, this has been fun. Let's do it again. Okay.
Here everything is regulated by machines. You'll find that things are very different here, very different here, very different here. Here everything is regulated by machines. You'll find that things are very different here, very different here, very different here. Later on you'll be shown to your quarters.